Let's see. I think we are. Here's this live transition. They're probably hearing. Here we go. Welcome back to the Change Position. I'm Melissa Cady, the Challenge Doctor, with my co-host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro. And today is Sunday Salutations. Normally we use Saturday Salutations at 2 p.m. Central, 12 p.m. Pacific Coast. So I can't say bi-coastal, but I guess Gulf Coast. That's kind of a coast, but welcome
You're
to our
close to a coast. Yeah,
halfway. I always think East West Coast, but welcome back. Yeah,
Southern
I guess
coast.
we
I guess
really
we do have
tri-coast.
We have 3 coasts.
Yeah, well, we're not tri-coastal quite yet. It's just 2 of us. Well, welcome back to Sunday Salutations, where we try to share what's been going on in our podcast and connect with our community, and also for Kevin and I to check in and say hi. And many times we're recording episodes. We like to, what do they call it? Chunking, where you do a few things in a chunk of time instead of like spreading it out over the week. So you ever heard that?
I have. I was trying to remember if that was the word though.
Chunking?
Batching or chunk?
Batching? Oh yeah, that works too. So
some people chunk,
chunking.
other people batch.
Well, sometimes weird words come up in my head. So
like, can you imagine that? What are you doing? I'm chunking. Okay.
Well, actually I've heard that in like people that pay down their mortgages, like using HELOCs or cash, where there's some chunking of payments. Like, I don't know, maybe that's where I've heard it. But all right, hashtag batching, hashtag chunking, whatever you want to say. We are getting a few things done today. So anyway, how are you doing today, Kevin?
I'm sure you're good. I'm thinking about whether I need to do some chunking or some batching for the rest of the day.
There's something just not right about that word.
I love it though.
Comes out of your mouth, it seems really strange. Just feels like you're calling yourself fat. I don't know, chunky or something. Anyway, we're here to start off our connection to everyone out there, and Kevin and I to get started with our Sunday work. So
yeah.
You want to talk about what's happened in the last week?
Sure, if I can remember how to do this.
Well, it's all about PPP.
Oh, the PPP. Yeah. You know me. Are you down with PPP? You were down with PPP because I know we talked about it. So it really depends on anybody else. But we talked about personal, professional podcast goals, and it was more of a overall discussion of kind of goal setting, goals in general, what we may or may not be working toward, what we should be working toward. And then we talked quite a bit on that. So we ended up with 2 episodes actually. Mm-hmm. And I think it's an interesting thought exercise for if you're listening to something like that is, we mentioned that there's a, time is sort of artificial construct. You can really set and do anything at any time. All these dates are arbitrary. There is some data that when you actually set into behavioral change around a meaningful date, you're more likely to comply with that. And so January 1st obviously has a lot of meaning to it, at least for many different societies or in Western oriented societies and things like that. So to kind of hear that thought process. And those were the 2 episodes, which is really all I have to I think that's all we have to report about, really.
Yeah, I think the first part was mainly just, some thoughts about, frameworks for goal setting and, our personal goals and how that applies to everyone out there, or even ourselves, and discussing that. And the second part is more on the professional podcast, goal setting, and some of I think what's relevant is that sometimes there's not always clarity in these things. That sometimes you choose a goal, and if it's very clear, that's great. But sometimes, what do you want your goals to be is kind of the bigger question, and that can be challenging.
Well, and what it also did is this week. So I do use this time to sort of review and revise and kind of figure out and kind of plan some things. And sometimes I just do arbitrary things like, this is what I want to work on. And it was really super interesting over this last week because I was digging through a lot of my own notes. I do encourage people to write stuff down and write down what your goals are. It actually doesn't matter as much whether or not you accomplish them, but that you have a record and you can see how things changed. And it was kind of interesting to me because I have been writing things down for a long time. And what I did though, when this kind of did this retrospective look, is all of my like big development work, when I started actually being aware that we can intentionally choose and kind of craft your life rather than sort of falling through it. It was after 2008 when I was deployed. And I think I talked about that a long time ago, where I brought some Tony Robbins CDs that I had actually bought in 2003 and didn't listen to them because he said, don't listen to them in my car. And I was so busy, that was the only place I could do it. And so it was after 2008 when I started writing all this stuff down. And it was really fun to kind of go back and look and to see that some of what was really fascinating is when I was making kind of some of the goals back then, a whole bunch of them didn't pan out. And that gave me some data on, well, why did those not seem to work out? And then the other ones, there were some like totally weird extrapolations, like by this date, I'm going to be this. We're totally over ambitious. But what was really fascinating though, is some of them I was like, holy moly, that's where we started. And this is where we are now. That's a lot of change. And so that was actually, that was fun and made me feel good, because you're like looking at it and going, holy crap, wow, look at all that stuff that happened. So kind of fun. I do, writing things down is useful. I think having kind of because memory is faulty, and kind of being able to look at it and then kind of be able to kind of pull back and say, oh yeah, that's what I was thinking at that time, or this is what was going on at that time, and this is how much has changed or hasn't changed. Useful process.
Yeah. I have, it's interesting because I haven't had, as much downtime. I've been surprised how busy my work has been at the beginning of January, which is not typical for, the
cash-based process.
Yeah. But the MLK week is a week where I have like a few days, a couple days more than normal. So that'll feel like more of my January 1st kind of week. So I'm looking forward to that, which brings me to just maybe some gratitude thoughts, is that, throughout this pandemic, I mean, I feel super grateful. I was thinking about this. I actually did like a 40-minute walk with like 2 segments of 40-yard little jogs. I've kind of been bad this last month on my activity, so I'm trying to gently ramp back up. But during that walk, I was just thinking how grateful I am for my health. And because right now I have a really good friend who has a friend who was really just not willing to get vaccinated. Pretty much a very healthy person who felt that, I can understand how when you feel invincible for almost, 40, 50 years and never really been sick, how it's hard to imagine that you could be so sick to the point where you're prone on a non-rebreather mask. At the same time, we have a lot of data and a lot of things to share that, from a risk mitigation, like you would think. But I just think about this person who probably didn't think that they would have any problems with kicking it, and obviously did. And I just think, my God, I'm so glad that I've been stubborn in my life at times. I could be stubborn, a lot sometimes, but but I feel like at some point, you realize, okay, this is way bigger than my stubbornness, I need to overcome the stubbornness in this situation. So I'm glad that I was not that person that thought, oh my God, I don't need anything. Like, the immune system is amazing. But when you really look at the whole animal kingdom, survival of the fittest, there's things to, anyway. So that's my main message of gratitude, is that I'm grateful for not only my health, and those things can always change, that are always evolving, but also my willingness to risk mitigate in ways that make sense with the evidence. So, what about you?
I think there's so much there with the risk mitigation thing, and I just don't get it with the vaccines. There's been so much misinformation in Wakefield's data that was flawed and was retracted because it was bad, but the damage was already done. That has it just
enlighten me on that.
So Andrew Wakefield was the guy in the 90s who started publishing the stuff that said there was a tie between autism and vaccinations. right? And MMRs.
Yeah.
And he made millions of dollars off of it. And ultimately his data was found to be fabricated and it was retracted, right? But it was you never hear about the retractions. When a study gets published, all you hear is when it's published, but we don't ever hear when it's flawed. That no one ever, blows it up. Instead, there's like 2 lines in the bottom of the journal. It says we had to retract this or whatever. And he started this huge push. I mean, there's always been it kind of, when you look at anti-vaccination efforts, this goes as far back that I've seen to the Revolutionary War with smallpox. They were actually fighting about it then. But in the modern era, you really kind of look at that threshold as in the late 90s, because then we started having all these people that were not getting vaccinated and all these unfounded fears that were found to be not true with autism and vaccines. We started seeing measles rise up, and that sort of set the stage then when you got this political thing now around the vaccine. And for me, it's like, I love vaccines. It makes so much sense. Instead of actually getting sick, why don't we introduce small particles of something to train your immune system? Yeah. You want to get your body stronger? You introduce weights, small weights, not too much, so that you can build up your muscle. It's like basically bodybuilding for your immune system. So why in the world wouldn't we do it? Yeah. And then you see these people say, well, it's just the flu or whatever. And this definitely influenced my decision on this. In 2018, I had not gotten the flu vaccine, most because I was lazy and I didn't go out and actively get it. We went up to Victoria, British Columbia, had a great trip. On the way home, we stopped for lunch in Port Angeles. I was in the middle of eating a big juicy burger, and I absolutely love big juicy burgers. And I also have this horrible eating habit where I will clean my plate. Halfway through that burger, my appy went like that. I did not feel hungry. I couldn't eat anymore. 20 minutes after that, I started having shakes and started feeling cold. On the 4 to 6 hour drive home, I was rigering in the car so bad. I was begging my wife to turn up the heat in the car. Yeah. And it is so hot now. We have the heat blaring. My kids in the back, my wife's in the front. They're all sweating. They're trying to lower their windows down because it's so hot in the car, and I'm freezing to death. Well, I got the flu. I was in bed for 5 days, and I wanted to die. And I was always laughing because it's just the flu. I'm like, you have not then had the flu recently, because this absolutely sucked, know? And that's just being sick, not the point where you have these respiratory problems where you're getting prone. So prone, for people who don't know, is when you actually have to lay face down, and then they're putting a mask on you. And they do that for lung perfusion. So you could actually, your lungs actually get more blood, and they can actually do the oxygen exchange better in that prone position. It's not comfortable. And if you imagine trying to sleep on your belly, I'm not a belly sleeper, and trying to do that for 10 hours, 12 hours at a time. So that's also a long way to say is I'm so grateful for vaccines. I honestly, at some point, don't understand why people are why they're doing whatever around it. It makes absolutely no sense if you I'm super healthy and fit, and I believe in eating good foods, and I'm a wellness person. Well, then train your immune system, make that wellness too. And then the last part on my little rant before I finish off here is if they're worried about this new technology, well, this new technology is going to go into cancer care, which is where it started. So if you ever get cancer and you still feel the same way, make sure you refuse those immune therapies, because that's what this stuff is going to be bound on. But my suspicion is that I'll remarkably change now for, I don't know, maybe there's less politics. So I am just tired of this. At some point, the science needs to talk, and it's not your science that confirms your biases. That's not science's. Really, science is designed to just present the data. And if it's not in some ways, at least challenging what your fundamental biases may be a little bit, and there's something wrong. I was a little questioning about the vaccine because it was a new technology. So then I had to go look and read about it and see how it worked. And then I was like, wow, this is like the coolest thing ever. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I am just tired of it. And to see the healthcare systems that are just getting totally overwhelmed, and seeing everybody run around saying, well, this isn't a big deal. Well, if it's only 1 in every 100 person that has that it needs to be prone to non-rebreathers, or God forbid, intubated, that's a lot of people. And the whole original reason that we started these lockdowns back in 2020 was not because we were going to prevent the spread of the virus, is because we were worried about overwhelming the healthcare system. We are now overwhelming the healthcare system. Like, when people are dying, from non-COVID related complications, people from having heart attacks, having cancer care delayed, having, gallstone pancreatitis like the guy did in the summertime, and there's no hospital beds for them because they're filled with unvaccinated people. That affects everybody. And it's selfish. It just comes down to the ultimate selfish act. And there's no reason for it. Like, there's literally no reason. Go get vaccinated. Yes, we will get sick. It doesn't make you immune, but the likelihood of you being in the hospital or dying becomes like infinitesimal and compared to other risks. So anyway, I'm done. Sorry.
No, it's fine. No, I find it interesting because you hear people on the flip side that are physicians that I think they're trying to like kind of look at those details of what you just said and really look at who's the highest risk and whatnot, and what do you do with people who've had COVID already, who are building some immunity of a certain, whatever strain they're exposed to, and then they get one vaccine. It's like, so should we be mad if they didn't finish the double dose? Like, I don't know. I feel like I have less against that if someone's like, okay, I had COVID, I got through it, and I'm going to get one of the vaccines just to get the spike protein and see if there's some like, generalizability to other ones. And I think I was someone who's young and healthy and got through it and just had one vaccine. I'm not saying that's the way people should do it, but
you're moving though the goalpost then, right? Because the question is really, you start with vaccinated versus unvaccinated. So now you're talking about partial response, and that's a different discussion to have, because then we're looking at ages. And the reason I'm bringing it up is this is what you'll a lot of the stuff is then people they stop remembering what the core question was that they were debating, and then you start seeing there's this drift with the discussion. And I think it's really important that we always return, well, what is it that we're talking about? And for me, the key argument is vaccinated versus unvaccinated, period. Partially vaccinated, we can start getting, those are the gray areas, and we can start having, those are alternative discussions. But until there is actual decision on vaccinated versus unvaccinated, really shouldn't be moving anywhere else. Because then someone who isn't unvaccinated hears that and says, and that's, I think I know some of the physicians you're talking about, because they're, and I've read some of the comments in there, and oh my God, some of the wackadoodles that they're attracting now. I'm like, holy crap, dude. And if you're trying to make money, this is where you're going to start pandering to, is the wackadoodles. But you need to set firm bounds. And we have, when we're doing episodes, sometimes we'll kind of go all over the place. But I've been returning more and more to this understanding that we need to define things. And when you're having a discussion, particularly around a really key public health issue, we need to have a firm definition of what the boundaries are. What is it that we're discussing? What are the implications of it? Why is this a problem? And then how are we going to implement change, right? And if you can keep those boundaries kind of at least intact, then we may actually figure out that we have good arguments and for or support, that we have good risk mitigation strategies, because we've seen this whole thing. It's just moving all over the place. I mean, again, like the reason for the lockdown that we started in March of 2020 was because we were fearful of the healthcare system being overwhelmed. It wasn't that we were going to make the disease go completely away. Somehow that
cat was out of the bag already.
It was out of the bag. And somehow though, the whole argument got blurred, and people are thinking, like, because you'll even see these unvaccinated people, well, the vaccinated still get sick, so why should I not get vaccinated? That's not the question. Is it doesn't make you bulletproof. Nothing makes you bulletproof, but it certainly decreases the risk of severe morbidity or mortality that's associated with the infection. And I think if they at least somehow, because now it's like, oh, it'll never go away, and people are drifting all over, but the health system is literally drowning now. All the stuff that we were talking about in 2020, that we initiated this stuff to try to prevent, is now occurring now, and almost nobody's talking about it. Instead, we're in these little things about whether you get, we shouldn't be talking about getting vaccinated. You should just getting vaccinated.
Well, the reason I brought that up is just obviously everyone, for the most part in this country, has a choice. You might lose your job, you might, you're making choices. And there are these different variables that people personally might make and actually might feel comfortable that they've reduced the risk, even if what you just said, just the fact that is, they know they survived it when they had it and they got a vaccine too. Like I could see how people can, they can make it work for them because that's what makes them feel, whether it's true or not, that's what makes them feel like they're okay. But my question to you before we get off this topic is the conversations about how the economy and all these businesses shut down. What's your take on that? Do you feel like it's been worth all that, or do you think things could have been done differently?
Well, I think if we're going to go to kind of hindsight bias,
Yeah,
right? There's some things that we could have changed. I do think at the beginning, everybody, so I'm going back to March 2020 and I'm trying to remember that time. And people are like, oh, we're destroying the economy. Well, at that moment in time, we had a novel virus. We had no idea
what it was going to do.
what it was going to do.
Yeah.
And we're not going to be able to. So we could very easily have been 3 months down the line and had a super flu that had a 20% mortality. And then we would have been saying we should have done more. Right. So let's not move the definitions on what we were trying. We're doing the best that we could with the data that we had.
Right.
My criticisms at the time was the face mask thing. When the CDC initially said we didn't need face masks, that was not based on anything, right? It's when the CDC and scientists start making political decisions rather than science decisions, I have problems. Yeah. Like the recent recommendations when they're decreasing the
5 days, go back to work.
And the director of the CDC says, well, we're doing this because we know nobody will comply. I don't care. If the science says this, then we put forth the science-based recommendations, and then human behavior, there's a difference between knowing what human behavior is and not. But when you try to imply both, then we're losing the argument of what the science says, right?
And so bending over backwards for somebody.
Yeah, and then they wiggle it all over, and then you lose authority and you lose trust because nobody trusts
credibility in general.
And I mean, and healthcare workers, it just cracked me up because in the physician groups, just the memes pouring out of that. Like CDC now says that healthcare workers and only healthcare workers can run with scissors. CDC says, I mean, it's just hilarious stuff if it wasn't so tragic on it.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to the economy, I do think my bias, this is my bias because I'm coming from a place of privilege here.
Yeah.
I have a job where I can work fully remote. I have stuff I can do where work fully remote. So the financial impact of these things didn't hit me as hard.
Yeah.
Now so does that influence my decisions? Absolutely influence my decisions. Do I think that we could have done more around the economy? That risk mitigation that's really hard. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it at all. I do think that there was a chance to pivot. And I think if you're a capitalist and you believe that the market can adjust to changes, I thought what we saw was there's a big difference between people who could pivot well, like really good entrepreneurship, where you saw restaurants suddenly pivoting to deliver meals at home. They started opening and increasing curbside delivery. They started making it. They started pushing forth this outside dining options to make it, right? Mm-hmm. Versus the people who complained and just said, you're taking away my livelihood and I'm not going to enforce this. That's just stupidity. And if we like to pretend we're completely capitalist, which this country is not. But if we want to use that argument, like we're a free market driven thing, well, the free market should have responded in such a way that adjusted rather than just complained. Does that, so, I did have some, I mean, there's other stuff like that. There's a lot of cronyism things that occurred with, some of the things that went to the airlines and the airlines didn't reimburse, or that even the PPP loans where hospitals were getting, and then they didn't really they cut their physician pay. I mean, there was a lot of abuses on this stuff. I don't have an answer to the economy, nor do I pretend I will have an answer to the economy. But I think overall, it's very difficult to armchair quarterback something that has happened in the past, and especially at the beginning. Like we had no clue what was going on in March of 2020, and to pretend otherwise is is so dangerous, because what if it happens again and then you don't respond? And then we do have, like, Stephen King's super flu that resulted in The Stand. I mean, that's theoretically possible. And once that presents, and if you don't try to cut it in the bud at the beginning, you're totally screwed. And that, if you're dead, you can't then pretend, oh, I wish I had made a difference. I wish we had massive lockdown in March of 2020. Oh, sorry, your whole family's dead.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Anyway.
Well, what a interesting almost 2 years. I don't know why my printer is updating during our
You probably heard me. It's like, God, you got to shut that guy up.
This Hewlett Packard thing, I guess I set it on auto, so it's like doing its updates while we're talking.
Oh, it's just like Sunday's usually when I do my updates.
But I guess they don't expect me to work on the weekend. So, yeah. Well, any I guess just to put it on a positive note, any thoughts or gratitude comments before you take us out?
Yes, I ranted so much I lost all of my positivity. No, I just noticed I actually just got a Amazon notice that I had a package delivered as we were doing this discussion, and that is one of the positive things, because as we started out with Salutations talking about the time of year and reflections, so I had some process oriented goals, things that I want to do every day for 2022, and one of them was about words. I want to learn a new word every day, and I want to see the etymology of it, so I got a calendar, and it just delivered. It's a word of the day calendar, and I'm kind of excited. Yeah, kind of excited like that, because as you know, I love words, and I love the etymology and learning where they came from, and providing these boundaries and kind of looking at it, and even chunking versus batching, because there's why would we just, if we're talking about mortgage payment, we talk about chunking, right? That actually sounds better versus saying batching mortgage payment if you're talking about like lump sums.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, well, the language is very interesting. So why do we do this stuff? Anyway, so I'm excited. Maybe I'll introduce the word of the salutation, word of the week for Saturday Salutation.
That'll work. I like it. Cool. We'll do it next time.
Sounds good. All right.
Which possibly let's see.
Oh, not next weekend. Next weekend. Next weekend we're having Saturday Salutations.
Saturday or Sunday?
Saturday the 15th.
Okay. So people look for us on Saturday.
Yeah, January 15th at 12 p.m. Pacific. We should be back.
Yep.
All
right. We'll take us out.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us for Saturday Salutations. Sorry if I get a little bit passionate about these things. I am nothing if not opinionated. I would like to say that I do have opinions, but I generally try to actually back up my opinions with facts. So there's that. But if you're interested in joining the physician community, whether you are a physician or physician ally, you can go to changedphysician.com. And until next week, January 15th at 12 p.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Central Time, stay well, and we'll see you then.
Take care.